What if I told you that 300 warriors once stood against the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, knowing they would die, but believing their sacrifice would save their homeland? This is the story of Thermopylae, but not the Hollywood version you think you know. The truth is far more complex, brutal, and ultimately more inspiring than any film could capture. The year was 480 BCE. The Persian Empire, stretching from India to Egypt, had set its sights on Greece. King Xerxes I, the self-proclaimed King of Kings, commanded an army so vast that ancient historians claimed it numbered over 1,000,000 men. Modern scholars debate this figure endlessly, but what remains undisputed is that the Persian force was immense, perhaps the largest military expedition the ancient world had ever witnessed. They came with cavalry units from the steppes, elite immortals from Persia, archers from across the empire, and war elephants that could trample phalanxes. Their navy alone boasted over 1,200 ships. This was not merely an army, but a moving nation, a tidal wave of humanity that consumed everything in its path. Greece, meanwhile, was not a unified country, but a collection of independent city-states that spent as much time fighting each other as they did external threats. Athens and Sparta, the two dominant powers, had fundamentally different philosophies. Athens valued democracy, philosophy, and naval power. Sparta was a militaristic society where boys were taken from their mothers at age 7 and subjected to the brutal agoge training system designed to create the perfect warriors. By the time a Spartan man reached 30, he was a killing machine, trained in formation fighting, capable of marching for days without complaint, and culturally conditioned to view death in battle as the highest honor. When news reached Greece that Xerxes was mobilizing this unprecedented force, the city-states faced an existential crisis. Some argued for submission. Others, particularly Athens and Sparta, chose resistance. But how could a few thousand Greeks hope to stop hundreds of thousands of Persians? The answer lay in geography and strategy. The narrow coastal pass at Thermopylae, where mountains met the sea, would force the Persians to fight on a front so narrow that their numerical superiority would become irrelevant. A small force of determined warriors could theoretically hold this position indefinitely, or at least long enough for the Greek fleet to engage the Persian navy and for the mainland cities to prepare their defenses. King Leonidas of Sparta volunteered to lead the defensive force. The decision to send only 300 Spartans was not arbitrary, but calculated. Sparta was celebrating the Carneia festival, a religious observance that prohibited the full army from marching to war. Additionally, the Olympic Games were underway, and many Greek states were reluctant to commit forces during this sacred period. Leonidas chose 300 men who already had sons, ensuring that Spartan family lines would continue even if these warriors fell. But the Spartans did not march alone. They were joined by perhaps 7,000 other Greek warriors, including Thespians, Thebans, and fighters from various city-states. The total defensive force numbered somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000, though the exact figure remains disputed. The Persian army arrived at Thermopylae in late August. Xerxes, upon seeing the small Greek force, reportedly waited for 4 days, assuming they would flee once they truly comprehended the magnitude of the force arrayed against them. He sent scouts who returned with peculiar reports. The Spartans were exercising, combing their long hair, and appeared completely unconcerned by the approaching doom. Xerxes found this behavior baffling, but it was precisely what Spartan culture had prepared these men for their entire lives. On the 5th day, Xerxes sent wave after wave of troops against the Greek position. The Persians fought bravely, but they were culturally unprepared for what awaited them. Persian military doctrine emphasized mobility, archery, and individual combat. The Greeks, particularly the Spartans, fought in a phalanx formation, a tight rectangular formation of overlapping shields and protruding spears. Each warrior protected the man to his left with his shield, creating an impenetrable wall. The narrow pass at Thermopylae meant that only a few dozen Persians could engage the Greeks at any given moment, negating their numerical superiority.
The fighting was extraordinarily brutal. Ancient sources describe corpses piling so high that the combatants fought on hills of the dead. The Persians would charge, crash against the Greek shields, and be systematically slaughtered. The Greeks would then withdraw slightly, allowing the Persians to advance further into the killing zone, then reform and repeat the process. This went on for 2 full days. The Persians lost thousands of men. The Greeks lost dozens. Xerxes grew increasingly frustrated. He deployed his elite immortals, the 10,000-strong professional warriors who formed the backbone of Persian military might. These were not conscripts, but career soldiers, the best fighters Persia could produce. They fared no better. The phalanx was simply superior in this narrow terrain, and Spartan training was unmatched. Where a Persian warrior might have months or years of training, a Spartan had been preparing for this moment his entire life. The stalemate might have continued indefinitely had it not been for betrayal. A local Greek named Ephialtes approached Xerxes with information about a mountain path that could outflank the Greek position. Motivated by the promise of reward, Ephialtes led a Persian force through the mountains during the night. When Leonidas learned that his position had been compromised, he faced an impossible decision. He could order a full retreat, saving his men but abandoning the strategic position, or he could stay and die, buying additional time for the Greek fleet and army. Leonidas chose sacrifice, but with nuance. He dismissed most of the allied Greek forces, allowing them to retreat and fight another day. He kept the 300 Spartans, approximately 700 Thespians who refused to leave, and 400 Thebans whose loyalty he questioned and therefore kept as semi-hostages. These roughly 1,400 men would make their last stand. The final day at Thermopylae was a masterpiece of defiant brutality. Knowing they would die, the Greeks abandoned defensive tactics and went on the offensive. They pushed out from the narrow pass into more open ground, maximizing Persian casualties even as they were being surrounded. The Spartans fought with their spears until the spears shattered, then with their swords until the swords broke, then with their fists and teeth. Ancient accounts describe Leonidas killing so many Persians that his body was fought over, captured and recaptured multiple times by both sides before the Persians finally overwhelmed the position. When the fighting ended, the pass was carpeted with Persian dead. Estimates suggest the Persians lost between 20,000 and 30,000 men over the 3 days of fighting, though ancient sources claim even higher numbers. Every single Greek defender who remained died, with the exception of a few who were sent away as messengers or who survived grievous wounds. But Thermopylae was not a defeat in the strategic sense. The Greek fleet had used the time to engage the Persian navy at Artemisium, preventing the Persians from landing troops behind Greek lines. The delay allowed Athens to evacuate its civil population before the Persians sacked the city. Most crucially, the stand at Thermopylae became a rallying cry that unified the fractious Greek city-states in a way that political negotiation never could. The psychological impact of Thermopylae on the Persian army was profound. They had just witnessed a tiny force inflict catastrophic casualties on the world's greatest military power. The myth of Persian invincibility had been shattered. When the Greek fleet decisively defeated the Persian navy at Salamis a month later, and when the combined Greek armies destroyed the Persian land forces at Plataea the following year, they fought with the knowledge that Persians could be beaten, that numbers alone did not determine victory, that courage and discipline and superior tactics could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The Spartans memorialized their fallen king with a simple inscription at Thermopylae. It reads in translation, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie." This epitaph captures something essential about the Spartan worldview. They did not fight for glory or personal honor, but for their laws, their way of life, and their fellow citizens. The individual was subordinate to the state, and death in its service was not tragedy, but fulfillment. Modern analysis of Thermopylae reveals fascinating details that ancient sources overlooked or exaggerated. The pass has changed dramatically over 2 millennia due to geological shifts and silt deposits from the Spercheios River. In 480 BCE, the pass was even narrower than it is today, perhaps as little as 15 meters at its tightest point. This geographical reality made the Greek defensive strategy viable. Recent archaeological work has uncovered remnants of the wall the Greeks built across the pass, foundations of structures that might have been used for supplies, and mass burial sites containing bones that show evidence of violent trauma consistent with ancient combat. The political aftermath of Thermopylae in Greece itself was complex. Sparta claimed the moral authority that came from having sacrificed its king and his personal guard. Athens, however, had evacuated its city and committed its formidable navy to the defense of Greece, arguably contributing more to the eventual Greek victory than Sparta's sacrifice at Thermopylae. This tension between Spartan land power and Athenian naval